Hello, this is Michael Hexter. Welcome to Politics 2100 here on YouTube. So this episode I'm calling Trump, Republican Neo-Royalism, and right-wing regression to childishness, irresponsibility. So this is a reflection. This is an idea that I've thought about on and off for the last several years, but was kind of uh, revived by a post I'm looking for it right now on Twitter about on a right wing blog, obscure right wing blog, or news website. There was someone who was advocating for the United States to become a monarchy, and so and this is something that is kind of new to have. Uh, and they're not saying to, for instance, to recognize the British monarchy, whatever, as our monarchy, but just to recreate monarchy in the United States. So essentially, um, getting rid of any pretense of being Republican, small r Republican, or democratic at all. So, there's been much commentary on authoritarianism and on the attack on democracy, but the actual idea of returning the United States to a monarchy is obviously extremely fringe idea, because not many people are advocating it, and we would more likely have a system, if the Republicans had their way, of kind of a authoritarian president, maybe even dictator of some kind, that based on minority rule, and so with some pretense to elections and so forth and so on, continuing on, uh, similar to how Viktor Orban has deformed Hungarian democracy, or restructured Hungarian democracy, or Vladimir Putin in Russia has done the same there. So or very similar there, and so. With a Duma, with whatever, a parliament functioning still, and the reason why I don't want to magnify the voice of this particular extreme right winger necessarily, but I think there's something. I think people need to recognize the dimensions and the patterns that are all around us that suggest that there is a yearning for a kind of regression to a childlike state, a subject. So the subject being like in a monarchic system, not a citizen, but a subject of a king or queen, or a royal family, and so therefore to abdicate some of the responsibilities of being a citizen in a democracy, or many of those, and just to imagine that one's obligations are to a individual, or due to some familial status that they have, and or some special, maybe even divine right that they have, that you then submit to as a subject of that person or family. So, and this is something, it's occurred to me that the way Republicans treat Trump, including Trump's foibles and Trump's slip ups, and his seeming fallibility as a person, the open fallibility of him as a person. He's not a particularly, he's not a Hollywood icon-looking guy. He doesn't, he's overweight. He's, an older guy, And he also has all these very extremely negative personal attributes in terms of personality, but for whatever reason, the base of the Republican Party. Now, again, there are limits to this, and he appears to be losing some power and losing some, but some popularity with the Republicans. He hasn't. His latest rallies have been somewhat ill-attended, and there may be signs that people are tiring of him. But he has a still, relative to other Republican leaders, the potential, the charisma, when he feels like it or when he seems to be in form, to at least he has more charisma than the alternatives in the Republican Party. So he, if he tried hard enough, he would win the nomination in 2024. With everything else remaining pretty much the same, because, for instance, Ron DeSantis doesn't have his charisma, and other contenders also don't have his ability to and it's to hold a crowd and to entertain. Really, I mean, he's often acts as an entertainer for his audiences. So. But anyway, I think that there is this different kind of relationship that they have now. I think this impulse to make enshrine people in a certain way as deities or quasi deities or exists, for instance, in the political center as well. That there are people in the Democratic Party who are considered to have certainly star status, if not kingly or queenly status, but they are often treated as beyond reproach by the base of the party. So, and thus the bitter rejection of people like Bernie Sanders or his supporters by the supporters of Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama or Joe Biden, when they feel like those people are not sufficiently obedient to the party consensus. So it's not exclusively an attribute of the far right or the Republican base. But anyway, I just think that this is a part of a giving up on adult responsibility by many people, mostly on the far right, most intensely there, but also in other parts of the political spectrum, that the U.S. political system is very, very corrupt, and people are looking for magical solutions. And one of the magical solutions that people can think of is of a tyrant, of a royal, of a king or queen who will rule justly and fairly according to some magical, internal qualities that they have that are inherent to them, and all of the art that was produced and the memes that were produced that created this aura around particularly Donald Trump, that had very little to do with him, the reality of the man. So these were projections by the base. But anyway, this this tendency is something that is concerning, to say the least. It's very troubling, and it needs to be called out or it needs to be recognized as the impulse to become a subject, to retreat from citizenship, retreat from small r republicanism, small d democracy, and to just give over one's responsibility to um, to a leader, and to say one doesn't have any say anymore. And I think a prerequisite to this is it's not just some kind of inherent psychological longing. It's a system, people living in a system um, where their voices have been stifled, where there's a choice between two parties that are unresponsive to um, people's needs, and so they're simply rolling the dice and engaging in fantasy about on and off fantasy about, well, maybe just this personality, this person will be the solution to it all if we just install them in some form or other, and we just forget it. We just forget about the complexities of living in a democracy or a republic. And the media has also contributed to this. They've created an aura. I think Cenk Uygur is very good in talking about how the mainstream media, or the establishment media like the New York Times, CNN, MSNBC, have created an aura around politicians of the center right, the Democratic establishment, and also some of the Republican establishment, that severely overestimates their intelligence and their ability to and their ethical sense and so forth and so on. That it doesn't notice the corruption of the system. So this creates in people in some way or another a detachment, even though they might agree on an intellectual level with what they're being told, somehow withdrawing within themselves, because they don't have they don't see real improvements and progress in their lives. They're giving up on progress. They want to go back. They want to go back in time. They just want to withdraw. And one of the forms of withdrawal is to hope to have a royal-like dictator, in other words, someone who acts like a royal. And that's, in some sense, Trump was flirting with that when he was talking, when he used this imagery, when he was trolling Democrats and so forth and so on. But he talked about, basically being a president for life, and there was all these memes that he had generated. So, and he seems to have no regard for he's so extremely narcissistic. He has no regard for rules, and people who are so inclined to feel like that's somehow magical and wonderful, that this person is so resistant to accepting rules and so forth and so on. Sometimes because the rules as they've been designed have been rules that have already biasing the elite, and so they're just giving up on rules, and they're just thinking, well, let's anoint this one person of the elite who says he's going to break things down and going to do things for us. Let's just let him run with it. And rather than support someone like Joe Biden, who's more this sort of cautious manager type person who seems to believe in the rules, and in a way that the rules that disadvantage ordinary people and advantage the elite, at least in the way that they are actually implemented, okay, and their implementation being, as we see now, it's increasingly unlikely that Donald Trump will be prosecuted for as many crimes, even though the Democrats tut and tisk about it, because every time every DA and attorney general and so forth and so on seems to fall on their sword, rather than actually bring charges and criminal charges, despite evidence of criminality. And it's not Trump alone. There's just a whole bunch of evidence of corruption, legal and illegal, and criminality, and where people are not only the only white collar criminals that are brought to justice are those that have bilked other rich people and have crossed other powerful people, and not kept this omerta of just keeping the elite together, even though they nominally are bickering with each other. And one, I'm talking about Trump and Hillary Clinton, or in other words, these two different political parties do involve the kabuki theater. But anyway, getting back to this theme, is that this game excludes ordinary people, so they have a sense of giving up. So the fantasy of a royal, of a benevolent parent substitute, which a king or queen is supposed to be. They're supposed to be the mother and father of the nation. And so so a longing for that starts maybe to creep in some people, and so we have this kind of permissiveness that they have, because they can, they have foibles, whatever the royals are, the madness of the kings over and so on is okay from the point of view of a royalist, a committed royalist, as sort of feels like, this is their family, they're head of their family, so the family of the nation, so that they've decided, and in this case, this is often racialized, in that most of the base of the Republican Party is white, and so Trump is sort of the white family paterfamilias, even though he's, outrageously negligent, and people should know that, and they should recognize that. So anyway, so this is also one principle that's been totally lost, which is supposed to be a conservative principle, is individual responsibility. So we have, Trump is someone who shirks individual responsibility nonstop, and we have a base, and we have also other Republican operatives who run away from responsibility. Many of them are themselves, the leaders are sociopaths. They tend toward law breaking or rule breaking, and they tend toward lying, and they just feel like they can just do whatever now, and the system gives them that feedback. In other words, the Democrats are not holding them to account, so that they continue to break laws. But there's also a wishfulness, I think, that the base has about being held, being able to escape any responsibility for actions, and to being able to to just do whatever, and to do crimes, to do violence, and to just vent one's bile, one's anger, and so forth and so on, and not to experience any consequences for one's actions. And so that's also part of this culture, I think, of a lack of individual responsibility, which is supposedly a conservative principle, but they're not conservatives. They are right-wing reactionaries, and they're simply running away from the future, and they're trying to run back into the past, and also to offload any negatives, to vent them on other people, to project them onto other people, okay, and not to take account of them, to earnestly try to understand, and to own them as much, to some degree. So anyway, so I'm just putting this out there because it fits, among other things, with what I was talking about in the last episode about the bad mommy introject or imago that the right wing is so um, opposed to, and so and uses as a scapegoat for its in its political ideology. And I just wanted to add a few more dimensions to that theme, and also to bring up this royalism or neo-royalism lens on current politics. So anyway, so if you found this stimulating, interesting, provocative, please let share any comments or thoughts you have in the comments. And if you liked the video, please like it. And also, please subscribe to this channel if you're finding Politics 2100 interesting and you want to hear more in this vein. And I hope to see you in the next video.